What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at the map design for Battlefield 2042 and how they're going to be changing things up to compensate for the 128 player lobbies on next gen and PC. Obviously the maps are going to be massive in this game, but it's not just as simple as literally expanding the maps by twice the size to account for twice the players. That's not really how map design works, and so there is going to be a little bit more going into it than we probably all realise. And in today's video I'm going to be touching on everything that the devs have told us about this stuff in the early reveal event at the start of June. Before we get into it, if you guys do end up enjoying the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new to the channel, then be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any upcoming Battlefield 2042 content. Now anyway, like I said, there is quite a lot of thought that's going into the map design in Battlefield 2042, and at the early reveal event, Daniel Berlin went into detail about this stuff to pretty much answer our concerns, as a lot of us in the chat were actually quite worried about the scale of the maps. Obviously, the bigger the map, the more time you're likely going to spend traversing it and not actually fighting other players, and even in Battlefield 5 on maps like Hamada or Panzerstorm, there are so many times when it feels like you've got to run for about a minute before you can even get through the battle, and then if you die straight away, then you've just got to do that all over again. So if the maps are going to be even bigger, then there's definitely some concern that this game will just become Running Simulator 2042. In response to this, Daniel and the team covered a concept that they refer to as clustering, where different objectives on the map are going to be grouped together in a way that pretty much counters the size of the map, meaning when you're in battle and sort of fighting in and amongst those clusters, you're never really going to realise that the maps are bigger than normal. Rather, they will still just feel nice and condensed, and it will still feel like there's a heap of action going on right where you are, because simply put, there will still be a lot of action in each of these clusters. How it was described to us is that rather than evenly distributing the flags across the map like they've done in most of the previous maps in the franchise, having them all somewhat evenly dispersed and having a similar distance between most of the flags, now they'll be broken up into different sectors, and therefore they'll generally be like 2 to 3 flags in one location of the map, rather than those 3 flags being spread across pretty much half the map, for example. We all know that feeling when you capture a flag on Conquest and there's not really any enemies left, and then you've kind of got to decide, okay, do I stay here and wait until hopefully some enemies show up and I can defend it, or do I run for a minute or two to this next flag and try and capture that one instead? And either of those options feels like it's going to be minutes until your next gunfight, regardless of which way you go about it. Well, with this new clustering system, once you capture a flag and you're in that same situation, there's going to be another at least 1 to 2 flags that are pretty close to you, in which you can then move on over and try and capture or defend, taking so much of that travel time out of it. And even if you do decide to stay and defend the one that you're currently at, well, there's still a much higher chance of enemies showing up faster, since they'll likely be coming from those other flags that are much closer than they normally would be. Essentially, there's just going to be much more distinct sections of the map now, rather than just like a whole map that's got flags spread across it. An easy way to think of it is that each map will kind of have like a few smaller maps within it, if that makes sense, and then between those smaller maps is where a lot of the actual map size comes from, having plenty of open sand dunes or open ice fields, which will be great for those of you who do enjoy using vehicles. Now, this system has actually been used before on maps like Golden Railway from Battlefield 4, or even to a degree Panzerstorm from Battlefield 5, but it wasn't done quite to the same extent, and it really only had like 2 flags in a cluster, rather than this newer version of clustering where there might be literally like 6 or 7 flags all within pretty close proximity of each other, and I think that will just allow it to flow much better and not require nearly as much travelling time as previous games. The other thing is that on Panzerstorm or Golden Railway, if the enemy team holds both of those flags within each clustered section, then you can't really spawn there anyway, so it kind of defeats the purpose. However, on Breakaway in Battlefield 2042, for example, there is literally a section that they showed that has 7 flags all within range of each other, not right on top of each other where it'll be too chaotic, but just close enough that you can quickly make it from one flag to the next, and so that removes the issue of one team holding all flags in that cluster. It's going to be extremely rare on Breakaway that one team will hold all 7 of those flags. I can't really see that happening very often at all, and if it does, then the game will be ending pretty quickly anyway, so that will at least put you out of your misery if you do end up in that situation. Now, none of this really guarantees that the maps are going to play perfectly. There's still a pretty high chance, honestly, that these maps are going to just not be that fun to play on when they're too big, unless you really enjoy playing in vehicles. But the good thing is that really only 2 of the maps in the game are these overly massive maps. The 5 other maps are all pretty much just a little bit bigger than the maps that we are already used to. For example, the 3rd biggest map in Battlefield 2042 will be Manifest, which is only about 1.5 to 1.7 at times the size of Caspian Border, which is a fan favourite map for a reason, because it did play really well. So don't stress too much about the size of these maps, because because 5 of the 7 maps are all going to be not too far from what we're already used to, and Kaleidoscope and Discarded, for example, are actually only just bigger than Rotterdam from Battlefield 5, maybe between 1.5 and 2 times the size of Rotterdam. So that's a perfect example of the maps not being too big. A map twice the size of Rotterdam with twice as many players will play pretty well as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is that if you're not able to play on next-gen consoles just yet, then you don't have to worry about these like overly big maps with only 64 players. The maps are going to be scaled down just slightly to account for those smaller lobbies, and so like I said, there does seem to be quite a lot of thought going into these maps in order to make them all play well. It doesn't at all seem like they've just made the maps 2 or 3 times the size and then expected that to work, because simply put, that's just not how it works. So I have faith in DICE that they've accounted for it as best they can, but only time will tell whether it pays off in the end, as like I said, even though it works on paper, that does not guarantee that it will work in game. But anyway guys, that is going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.